What up, everyone? Back for another video. Oh, great, I woke Whoop up. Sleep. Sorry. So, back for another video. This was supposed to be a later in the week video because this week was supposed to be Godzilla vs. Kong. But at the very last minute, HBO decided to push it out for a week, which is really annoying, and they didn't explain why. So now I'm doing a video that I'm not entirely prepared for. Not that I prepare anyway, but still. So that's going to be next week, and that will be a later video, and we're doing just a normal video this time around. What we're going to be talking about is grading. Comic books, cards, video games. Is it worth it? Is it something you should look into? What's the process? What does it cost? A few other things of that nature, and feel free to ask questions in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So I just so happen to have gotten the video games back that I sent out to get graded a year ago this week, so it worked out just fine. So we'll talk about that, the ups and downs and the perils of that. I'll talk about my experience with them, I'll show off the video games I have, and we'll touch on the other media as well. So, really quickly, just to answer the question, is it worth it? For the most part, yes. There's situations where you should, situations where you shouldn't, but, for the most part, it couldn't hurt. It's just, it's not always worth your money, is the short answer, and we'll go into detail more about that. And the reason I'm doing this now is because the collectible market has exploded in recent history. And for the longest time, everyone said the same thing. Oh, the bubble's going to pop. The collectible bubble's going to pop. And it already did. It already came and went. The bubble did pop, but not in the way that people were expecting or assumed. And I've said this a million times. People are stupid. They say a lot of shit with nothing to back it up, and that's how it goes, how it has been for years and years. So the bubble already popped on the collectible market. It already collapsed. It just wasn't as drastic as it has been in recent past. And with this past year, with the quarantine, the collectible market has exploded. Crazy. And that's for everything. Not like a specific fad like Beanie Babies or Pops or anything like that. Just the entire market. Everything has gone up in value significantly. And that's because all the money that the government's been throwing at people, all these stimulus checks. They're supposed to be there to bail people out, but for many, many people, like myself, we didn't necessarily need a bailout. A lot of us were still able to work, and we just got these checks, and we had nothing to do with them, and we as Americans are very stupid, and we don't know what to do with them, so we buy collectibles, and that's what we do. So since the quarantine happened, I've been monitoring things like Nintendo games, and it has skyrocketed. And I had two very close friends that buy and sell comics online. They have a very successful business, and they told me the same thing. The comic books have jumped up significantly. There was a CGC Turtles #1 that I showed off in my house tour. Very first Turtle comic ever. I bought it off them for like $400. Now it's worth like $4,000. Same with these video games. When the quarantine happened, I started researching into buying old Nintendo games. That's something I decided to start collecting. And in the months I was watching it, the prices just skyrocketed because people were at home with nothing better to do with all this expendable income, so they invested it into it. So the collectible market is huge right now, so now's a good time to throw some money into getting them graded and getting them permanently preserved. In that same sense, all these companies that are grading have started upcharging now because they see that. They see this surge, and now they started charging more money. So in general, for each type of grading, so as far as games, comics, cards, there's usually two main contenders. There's a bunch of companies that do it, but two that are worth mentioning. There's always one that's the top dog, that's the most notoriety, that charges the most, that's worth the most resale value, and they've just been around the longest, but also have a bad record of doing some pretty shady things. And then there's always a number two that's more trustworthy and reliable, but they just haven't been around and haven't been doing it as long, so the stuff they grade isn't worth as much, which sucks. It sucks that those companies don't make as much money when they sell, but it is what it is. So there's always going to be a number one and a number two. For comics, it's CGC and CBCS. For video games, it's WATA and VGA. For cards, collectible cards, it's PSA and Beckett, and there are a few others that are kind of mixed in there. But you don't really want to go outside like the top 2 or 3 because those companies are just not notable enough, and it probably wouldn't increase the value to get them graded. You want to stick to those top 2 or 3 companies. So, for example, we'll talk about some of the shady things that have been going on. CGC and CBCS, for example, those comic ones. My friends told me the story of how they got a CGC comic graded. They didn't agree with the grade, so they cracked it open and sent it back, and it came back with a completely different grade. Same exact comic, completely different grade when it came back. And then CGC got wind of it because they had talked about it, and they wanted it back because apparently when you go into business with these people, you sign a contract, and they're able to take it back at any time, legally speaking. And it was a whole big ordeal, and they kind of got called out on a lot of their bullshit, and it was almost got into a legal matter. And I won't go into all the details, but there's the bigger companies are often called out for not being accurate with their grading because they're trying to grow their company, and often there's the grading can sometimes be very subjective, so it's hard to micromanage, and often the grades are subject to different opinions. So that's the number one. Companies often have that problem of getting too big and not regulating their exact grading, and that's where the number two company comes in. A little more trustworthy, smaller companies, so they're more focused on getting that accurate grade, but they're not worth as much money. Problem I had with my WATA ones, we'll talk about that story now. So here are the games I got, by the way. I'll show them off. So I got a Mega Man, first one, original, complete in box. This was a 6.0 IMP. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. Then I got the Ninja Turtles arcade. The reason I sent this is because it was sealed, and I wanted to get a sealed grade. And then I got a sealed, not sealed rating. We'll talk about that as well. Then I got some original ones that were just in very good condition. So the original Mortal Kombat 8.0. Then I got the, it was 8.5. Original Killer Instinct 8.0. And then Mortal Kombat 2 9.0. Complete in box with all the attachments, posters, all that stuff. So we'll go through some of those and talk about what that means and what it takes to get things graded. So overall, roughly price-wise to get things graded, you're looking around a $50 range, give or take 10 or 20 bucks, because there's so many variables. It depends on what it is. The higher the value on the item, the more expensive it is to grade because of insurance. They will charge you more if it's worth more because it's a liability for them. Now, you can just lie, honestly, if they don't know, but there's problems with that. One, if something does happen, they're not going to pay you as much. And two, you might just get caught because they know things and they know how much they're worth, so you may get caught in a lie. So that's a risk if you want to take it. But so around that $50 range, and depending on what it is, give or take, because if you look on their website, it'll show a much lower price, but they're not telling you the whole price. There's a lot of fees involved, there's shipping, there's all kinds of service charges, but around that $50 range, give or take. And I wouldn't waste my time getting something graded unless it was either a 7 or above or over $1,000. That's my basic rule of thumb that you can live by. That's what I would go for on that. And, the other alternative is that if you have something that you just is very valuable to you, it has some sentimental value, and you want to get it graded, sure, absolutely do that. You have a family heirloom, something you want to pass down to your kids, whether it's valuable or not, it's worth that money to just go get it graded, have something preserved, because it keeps it sealed and it keeps it well preserved, because there's so many things that can happen. All these things are made of paper and cardboard, and even if you have them somewhere safe, just things like the air can the oxidation of these things can turn it colors, and there's just bugs and moss and stuff like that. So if it's something important to you, absolutely spend the money, no doubt about that. But if you're looking for the collectible market, that's what we're going to talk about. And that's what I'd say. I wouldn't send something to get it graded unless it's like a 6 or a 7 or above. Anything below that, I probably wouldn't waste my time. And the first question you're going to ask is, how do I know if it's a 6 or a 7? That you kind of have to use your best judgment on. I know none of you are professional graders, but you can look at something and give it a number with your best judgment. It's not going to be perfect, but you can that's why I say 6 or 7, you can kind of generalize. Anything lower than that, I think it would be a waste of your time. Because when something is a high grade, it's nice to have that number on there. It's nice to have that stamped on number that says, yeah, this is a 9.8 and this proves it. Because when you're selling things online, it's hard. It's so subjective because someone could say, hey, this is a 9.8, but unless it has that stamp, it's all opinion. It's all conjecture, and you have to look very closely at the pictures. So it's nice to have that number. When you go below, like a 5, that may be worse off, because when you have like a 2 on there, you really don't want to advertise that. If something is in poor condition, you're probably better off just selling it and saying it's in good condition and leaving it up to the buyer to judge what condition that's in. So that is the grading part of it. And then other than that, even if it's in poor condition, if it's worth over like $1,000, then I would say still send it in even if it's at a lower grade. So that's my basic rule of thumb if things you should get graded for that. And then my story with WATA is that we sent these games in and they had a 90-day, I think it was, turnaround time. Basically, they say that from when you send it in, it should take roughly 90 days for them to grade it and send it back to you, which already is a very long time. And you could pay extra to get a 30-day turnaround time, but it was an extra, I think, like 20 or 30 bucks a piece. And when you're sending in $5, it's an extra $100. So it was like, no, I think I'll just wait. The problem with that was a 90-day turnaround time turned into a 1-year turnaround time. So they contacted us after we sent it and paid it and everything, and they said, hey, we know we said 90 days, but now it's going to be 6 months, and now you have to pay more. Which, by the way, I'm pretty sure is illegal, by the way. I think that's like extortion or something like that. That we already paid them for a service, and now they come back to us and say, we're not going to do it unless you give us more money. It's like, I think that's illegal. P.S. WATA. I'm pretty sure that's illegal to do, to try to get more money out of someone and threaten not to grade it. So we got into a big argument with them, and we essentially got them to do it at the price they promised, but it was now going to be 6 months, which was already really shitty. 6 months passed, and they kept contacting us. Long story short, it ended up being a year, and they kept trying to get more money out of us, which was really shitty. And that's what I say, that number one company, WATA and CGC, two different stories now, where they're just really into some shady shit, and their credibility is going down. But at the end of the day, those companies are worth more. When you have a graded item, one company, like WATA versus VGA, one's just going to be worth more. And that sucks that you have to deal with these assholes and get treated like shit to get something that's a little higher in value. But that's a choice you'll have to make. Business ethics versus your time and money, things like that. So that's the story I ran into with these games. But yeah, we'll go into some more of the grading here and we'll talk about that. So, things you need to know oh my gosh, can't talk. Things you should know if you want to get video games graded. I said there are 3 different things: comics, cards, and video games. As far as I know, there's not a grading system for collectible toys and things like that. I know there are some companies that do it, but none that have enough credibility worth mentioning. Hopefully that changes. I hope there are some companies that stand up and really take hold of it and really do that well. And because I'd like to send stuff in. They can start out with something as simple as pop figures. It'd be really easy to grade those and then move on to carded figures. So I hope there is a company that gains enough notoriety to where I can send stuff in, because I'd like to do that. Comics and cards are very straightforward. It's very condition-based. Things like the page quality, tears, creases, it's very simple. Video games, on the other hand, whole different ballpark, because you get into things like things that are sealed, because originally they're sealed, and if they're opened, and if they're complete in box, because there are various parts that go with the game. Each game at least has the box, the cartridge, the little plastic cartridge, and then a manual. And beyond that, a lot of these had additional things in there. Like a lot of them came with posters, and a lot of them came with additional instructions and things like that. And some of them came with little art books. Some later games come with things like that. So it's all things to know. The first one we'll talk about is Mega Man. So I said this is a 6.0, but you see it says IMP right there. And that basically means incomplete. Like you see INC when you got grades in school. IMP was incomplete, kind of. It stands for Improperly Married Part, I think is the exact acronym. And I guess I shouldn't say incomplete, because it's slightly different than incomplete. Basically, it had all the parts in there, but not the original. And unfortunately, they don't go into detail here. So I did notice they have this little QR code on the back, which I'm assuming they keep a database of all that, so you can scan that and look it up later. They wanted to charge us, there's so many upcharges, by the way. They wanted to charge us for that detailed breakdown. It was like an extra $10 a piece, which we didn't do. But now that I've seen these, I kind of wish I had, because I was curious about them. But yeah, there's a detailed breakdown that you could pay extra for. So hopefully it's not too late. Hopefully you can go back to the company and pay for it at a later date, because otherwise that information is useless. Improper married part, whatever the I stands for, essentially means, for example, on a comic book, there are things like the staples on there. Sometimes people take out old staples because they're rusty and they're going to damage the pages, and they put a new staple in there. That's improperly married part. So it's the same thing. It's still a staple, and the staple's not really worth anything, but it's not the original staple. And that's what happened here. I read on the back, it says very small, it says manual restaple. And that's all it was, improperly married part. So the parts are still there, it's still complete, but they could tell it wasn't the original staple. So at some point, someone tore off the staple and then just put a new one on there. Not a big deal, but it's good that they noticed those things. It's good that they were that close in attention to detail to notice that the staple's been replaced. So that's what you'll see, IMP, all the parts in there, but something has been switched out, but it's usually simple like a staple. Next, I had my Ninja Turtles. Sealed, not sealed. So I'll give you a close-up here. And right here it says sealed, and then an NS for not sealed. What does that mean? Essentially, games, when you have them sealed, it's a different grading system. When it's sealed in the box, they're not going to open it up, obviously, because that breaks the seal. They can only grade it based on what they see on the outside. And they'll usually give it a letter grade. Normally, there's a letter grade right there. Now, not sealed means it's not the original seal. So this is good and bad for me. One, it's bad because I was hoping it was factory sealed, so that's a bummer for me. But it's good because they are able to tell the difference. So I was kind of thinking that maybe they wouldn't be able to tell the difference and it would get a higher grade. But it's good in the long run to know that they can tell the difference, so it's more trustworthy for that company. And when I bought this game, I kind of knew. The guy that sold it to me said it is sealed, but I'm pretty sure it's not factory sealed. So at least the guy was honest. I appreciate that. So I didn't pay an outrageous price. I didn't get ripped off. But the funny thing about that, though, I assumed, since it wasn't factory sealed, that they would pop it open and then grade it accordingly. That's not the case. So what they do is say sealed, as in not factory sealed, but they still won't open it. If it is sealed, they will not open it for you because they don't want to ruin the integrity of it. Which is kind of a bummer, though, because we don't know what's in there, though. Since it was not factory sealed, it was resealed at some other time, so I technically don't know what's in there. I had to trust someone's opinion that it's the original parts in there, but we don't actually know. So this is a situation where I'm not actually sure if it was better to get it graded, because there could be anything in there. It could be a different game. It could just be a rock in there. Like, I don't know. Since we didn't break it open, I'm not really sure. And I wasn't about to have them send it back, open it up, send it back again, because that would have cost another $100. So I said, fine, just do that. And it is what it is. I waited a year. I'm not waiting 2 years to get my game back. Fuck that. So that's what that means. Sealed, not the original, but they're still not going to break it open. Other than that, there's not much else that's on here that's worth mentioning. For the most part, the highest grade you'll ever get is a 9.8, and that's why I mentioned that in the beginning. And the reason for that is the only way for something to get like a 10 is it literally has to come like off the factory line, or has to come, like if it was a pack of cards, has to be a sealed pack of cards and come straight out of there, which is just impossible to do because you don't know what's in there before you open it. So it's just not possible to do that for the most part. There's a few examples of that happening. So 9.8 is roughly the highest you can get. That being said, these are decently high, and this one was just on the borderline where this Mega Man #1 is worth a ton. I knew it wasn't going to get a super high grade, but it was still worth grading because that's where it's like, it's pushing that $1,000 limit, and it's kind of getting up there, so it was worth doing. So to wrap up, like I said, it is worth it, and it is worth your time. Keep in mind the rules. I would keep it at a 6 or a 7 above grade-wise, or over $1,000. Or if it's just something that has high sentimental value, those are the times I would get it graded. Those are the times it is worth it. Anything below that, it's not bad. It's nothing against it, but don't expect it to increase in value. I wouldn't say there's ever anything wrong with doing it, just for the sake of preserving it. And if it does come back with a really low grade, like I said, where it might hurt the value, there's nothing that says you can't crack it back open. It's not that big a deal. It's not that hard to get them back out of there. Like, go for it. Like, it's not that not that big a deal. So just for the sake of preserving yourself, it might be worth it. But just keep in mind, these do get expensive. And the higher the value, they can cost upwards of $100 to even $250 to get one grade. And yeah, it can be very, very expensive. But if you have a big collection and you want to preserve it, you're like me, you know you're going to keep this stuff for as long as you can the rest of your life and maybe sell it as an old man or pass it down to your kids, why not? I think I'm going to go through, here's my games by the way, I think I'm going to go through the trouble to get a lot more of these graded because I got a lot of good ones in there. I think I might send another batch. I'm not sure if I'm going to send it to WATA though. I think I might try out VGA and see how they do, and maybe I'll come back with another video and talk about it. But with my experiences, those #1 companies are always trouble trying to get more money of us. They're not honest. So I might have to go with the secondary companies. And I think I'm going to try and get some cards graded too. But oddly enough, trading cards are some of the most expensive to get graded, which is so odd to me. The amount of work that goes into grading the video game, I get why it's the price it is, because there's a lot of grading to be done. And a comic book has some, and a card is literally one thing, but it's still like $50 to get it graded, which is so crazy. It's small, it's light, it's easy to ship. It seems like it's easy to grade, but I haven't had a ton of experience grading cards yet. I know about comics, I know about games. Feel free to ask in the comments. I'm not sure about cards, so I may come back with another video, talk about VGA, and maybe talk about some cards I got graded. So anyway, I know this is kind of jumbled. Like I said, this is a last-minute video because I wasn't planning to do it, and the information is all mixed up in there, but hopefully it made sense for the most part, and hopefully this helped you in some way, because at the end of the day, that's what this channel is all about, trying to help the community. So yeah, if you have any questions at all, I said, please let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer questions to the best of my knowledge, or at the very least point you in the right direction. And if anyone has any stories from these companies, please share them below. Like good stories, bad stories. I'd like to know. I hope it might just be a fluke. Maybe I've just had bad experiences and everyone else has had positive ones. I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions. And other than that, yeah, collectible market has gone up significantly, so now's the time to invest. And other than that, we'll see you on the next video. The next one should be Kong vs. Godzilla next week if they don't push it out again, but who knows these days. Every day is such a mystery with everything going on. So hopefully that'll be it. Then a regular video after that, and then Mortal Kombat after that, which should be dope. Other than that, thank you for watching and supporting. We'll see you on the next video. Love you all. Peace.